Please join me in giving a big Texas welcome to Dr. Gary Null.
Thank you. Calm down. You'll live longer. Recently this year, on 2 occasions, once in Las Vegas before 5,200 physicians and scientists, and then earlier in Chicago at the International Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, I had a chance to present something. I'm going to give you an overview of what that was. There are probably 15,000 physicians and scientists trying to understand why we are not living a longer life. And they're looking at the cells, they're looking at the telomeres, and they're looking at the genes, and they're trying to find, most of them, some genetic factor that they can patent and therefore make a lot of money. After all, the single most successful thing a human being could do today is find anything that could reverse disease and extend life. So that a lot of money is involved in the field. And I'm thinking, what if they're on the wrong track? What if they're not taking into account how many other pieces to the puzzle there are? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I believe are the pieces to this puzzle that we should be paying attention to that most people do not, and see if this makes sense to you. It was 1972. I was a research fellow at the Institute of Applied Biology in New York, where I was for nearly 30 years. I handled 3 areas. I did research in anti-aging, I did research in the nature of disease, what is known as the pathogenesis of disease, and on the side of view, I did what is known as psi research, energy research. And I had to do that quietly because it was a very orthodox institution. And anything that wasn't absolutely straight arrow, they were mainly chemotherapy and radiation researchers there, they wouldn't pay attention. Well, I was the low person on the totem pole, so when I talked about nutrition, they said, nutrition, what's that have to do with anything? And at that time, nutrition was not considered important. In fact, in the actual AMA mainstream references outside of kwashiorkor or marasmus, severe malnutrition, nutrition had nothing to do with anything. In fact, the Arthritis Foundation and the Heart Association said everything in moderation. To me, that didn't make sense. If something is toxic, it is still toxic in moderation. It just takes longer to manifest a disease, right? I mean, could you imagine saying, I want a moderate amount of herpes? Just a little bit. Not enough to make me itch, just... So I'm thinking, something's wrong with this model, because I look around and all over America, I didn't see people living long lives. And where I grew up, nobody lived a long life. And by the age of 40, then you were expected to be old. No one expected you to be doing anything that active. And by 60, you were expected to have big hips, and you're supposed to have arthritis and hypertension and diseases. And then in your 60s or 70, you were gone. But we know biologically there's some cells that are virtually immortal. We know that we can live and should be living between 120 to 150 years in ideal health. We also know that there is no disease normal to the aging process. None. Not Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, not arthritis, diabetes, no disease to aging. But yet we determine aging based upon the diseases you have. How do we get it so wrong? How do we turn science upside down? To find the answer, I could not find it in the United States. I went around the world. I traveled over a period of 5 years to countries, and I simply looked carefully at how they were living. And I found that you go to Italy, their dogs and cats live almost twice as long as our dogs and cats. Why? Why is it common to see dogs 25, 26 years old? Here we think it's good to get 8 to 12 years, 14, 18 is a long-lived dog. And I started seeing the people, and give you one example of how I did this. I had a guy, a physician, who spoke Italian, was in a Jeep, and I would run. In a morning, I'd do like a 20-mile run that day through small villages. In a village in Italy, if you've been up in the mountain area, there may be 8 to 12 houses in a hamlet. And then you go a couple more miles and there's another one. Some of these houses are 400 and 500 years old. Some of these families are long families there. And they're all very nice people. And I would say, if I work with you for a day, help you with any of your chores, would you just let me ask some questions? And I would ask questions. They were always open. They didn't take vitamins. They didn't have any systematic exercise. They almost had no major diseases, and they were living long lives. And a lot of that came when I was watching them eat. All over Italy at noon, everything just shuts down. And they take about a 3-hour siesta. But it starts with a meal, and almost everything in the meal is home prepared. I watched them marinating their tomatoes and their peppers. I watched them take the time making fresh pasta. I saw them mill the pasta that they cut the day before and make the pasta that we were eating. Now, I don't eat wheat. I'm a vegan, and I'm allergic to wheat. But I could eat that wheat. I knew the worst what happens is that I get a little brain fog, but it didn't happen. So clearly there was a difference between the wheat I was eating there and the wheat I was eating here. But it was fresh. And the tomato sauces were fresh. And everything was cooked. It was the first time in my life I actually had garlic I enjoyed. It was light brown, not burnt. Nothing was high heat. They took their time. And I also noticed how leisurely everything was done. Nothing was rushed. Everyone had their own little vineyard. Everything was on the side of hills. I saw people in their 90s out there walking up down the hills, tending things. And in their attic, they had bags, brown bags with herbs in them. And in one home alone, they had 131 different types of herbs. So whatever they needed, they had their own apothecary. They'd go up, they'd cut off some herbs for something. They had 14 different types of olives. And in each olive, they put different herbs and marinate them. So each one had its own unique taste. They didn't have diabetes, colorectal cancer, diverticulitis. They didn't have gastric reflux. And when you looked at the generations, they talked about how long everyone lived. We have nothing to compare to it in the United States. You'd have to go to Okinawa to find people living that long. And by the way, people in Okinawa are the longest lived people, and they're Japanese, in the world outside of people living on Crete. Now, I'm watching this table, and from kids down here to the matriarch and patriarch here, I watched how they ate. And most importantly, I'm sitting in the middle table, and I'm just kind of watching, and the man is 91, and the wife is 87, and I see the sparks of joy and passion and life going between them. Unconditional love. And I saw something I don't see. People were relaxed, they were at ease. So when I came back, and I saw that in Jamaica, and I saw that in Trinidad, and I saw it in the Dominican Republic, and I saw it in Brazil, in Venezuela, I saw it in Germany, there was an ease at which people lived. So clearly, they had a part of this formula that we didn't. We were looking for the molecular reconstruction. Also, you don't see the fast food joints all over many of these places. You go in people's homes, like in France, there's very little food in their refrigerator. Why? They go every day and get fresh stuff. Every day they go to the market. In Germany, you see people with satchel on their bikes, riding bikes, and they have strong legs. And you see people, each country had a different cuisine, but they all had something that we could learn from. They slowed down to the speed of life. And we recognize those. We're speed freaks. Americans are like cockroaches on speed. That's true. It's never fast enough. So I went into the laboratory and I was doing some research. And what I did was this. I took a group of rats. And by the way, this is interesting. When I told them I want to do this, they say, well, we're not giving you any rats. They didn't believe any of this. It's a waste of rats. So I would go in at night when they all were gone, and at night all their rats that they had done x-rays, tests on radiation tests or chemotherapy, they would kill, and I would go around and take them out before they suffocated, and I'd sneak them upstairs. And over a period of 3 months, I had about 1,000 rats. Now, then I would separate them into groups. And one group I gave only living foods, meaning they would get enzyme-rich, nutrient-dense foods, pure water. Another group I gave the standard American diet. And I went out and I interviewed 400 physicians, nurses, and public health officials on the Upper East Side, where all the major hospitals in New York are. And I gave them what is called the medical diet. And then I gave standard rat chow. And it was to see what would happen. Well, over a year, the standard rat chow lived about a year. I had, out of humanitarian reasons, I had to stop the doctor's diet because the rats were getting sick and dying in 3 months. By the way, that's the diet you get if you follow your doctor's advice on what to eat. But the living food group was living a year and 3 months. Now, this preceded Dr. Roy Warford at UCLA. This was the first study in American history with rats that actually extended their lifespan by changing the nutrient impact. I then said, okay, now let's reduce it down again. I took this living food diet, and then I gave it with supplementation. I started giving nutrients, high levels of vitamin C, glutathione, the B complex. I would give massive amounts of nutrients. Plus, I didn't give them water. I gave them pure chlorophyll. I figured chlorophyll is what? It is the blood of the plant, and very similar to hemoglobin. And so they got no water, but they got all the juice they could drink. And the juice was fresh and it was organic. They lived the longest of all. Now, here's what was interesting. When I went to present my findings at the committee, they rejected them because they said, you couldn't have done this. I said, I did do this. They said, well, you couldn't have used our rats. Our rats were already immune compromised. They were going to die. I said, yeah? So then give me a double hello. I healed your rats, something you haven't done. Think of that. They're looking for the cure for cancer, and I'm curing their cancer. I'm curing their radiation sickness. I'm curing their chemotherapy reactions. I'm taking rats that have suffered from iatrogenic episodes and reversing them. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't wrap their mind around that. Well, if they couldn't wrap their mind around that, they really couldn't wrap their mind around the idea I brought in people who prayed over the rats and had them, who had ascites tumors, only lived 22 days, and reversed those diseases. Could you imagine that? What do you mean someone prayed over? Yeah, I had people praying over rats and the rats were cured. That had never been done in the world before. Have you ever heard of Dr. Dolores Krieger, the founder of Therapeutic Touch? All nurses in America, every nursing school in America, you learn Therapeutic Touch. All right? Rat number 37, I brought her in. She used her prayer, and 6 out of 6 times over 2 years, Rabbi Abraham Wiseman prayed. Dr. Thomas Cruth, the Order of St. Luke, prayed. The chiropractor known as having healing hands, Dr. Morton Jacobs, prayed. Have you ever heard of Olga Worrell, the great healer? And suddenly there was a new phenomena, a phenomena that no one had done, that we are more than organic material. We are a vital life force. Vitalism had ceased to exist in America. So I said, we are figuring there's a part of this puzzle. So then I started doing research on energy. I did over 120 experiments using energy. And all of them scientifically done completely, published in Psychotronic Research. And then I started combining the pieces. And then I started to work with a group of people. So what I did is I said, at the end of the day, no one's going to believe me if I don't do it based upon their rules. So what did I do with their rules? I took 13,000 people over 13 years with every disease imaginable. And to get in, you had to have all kinds of illnesses. Healthy people were not allowed in this. And then there was medical supervision with Dr. Martin Feldman, board-certified, magna cum laude from Yale College of Physicians, Surgeons, Columbia, assistant professor of neurology at Mount Sinai, 63 published papers in peer-reviewed journals, as just one of the medical supervisors. And then what did we do? I gave every person the same identical protocol. Never once in 13 years were you allowed to mention your illness. Never once was an illness treated. Never once was medicine ever mentioned. At the end of that time, for the first time in world history, and that's why I was invited to present my information at these august bodies, I was able to show you could reverse every single disease by varying degrees, including completely reversing Parkinson's. Totally. The man got up there, Mr. Thomas, shaking like a leaf first. And by the way, we filmed all of it. Every single person was filmed before and after. And what do you think happens when a man is shaking like this, has no memory at all, and 13 months later has, for the first time, acute memory? That means, I said, what happened the year you were in high school? He mentioned every single classmate's name and what was being taught. Acute memory. All right? We reconnected all of the neurites in the brain. The little webs that cause message to go from cell A to cell B, from neuron A to neuron B. That had not been done before. And because we had medically supervised it, because we had not treated the disease, but rather we promoted wellness, which showed that we had the wrong approach in America. We are looking to medicine to try to get us healthy. They know nothing about health, nothing. If you got a lobotomy, you'd be smarter than any of the doctors when it comes to health. I'm from West Virginia. I'm a little crazy. See, I can say all this stuff. Well, you say, I'm from Parkersburg. Okay, go ahead and say it. Now, I don't blame them for doing medicine. Good. Saves lives. Helps you when you need it. Sometime. Read the article I published called Death by Medicine. The number one cause of death in America is iatrogenesis. 740,000 Americans dying this year from medicine. Number one cause of injury. So when it works great and is to be used. But when it doesn't work, like Vioxx, 100,000 dead, it should be challenged. So I just don't buy a whole paradigm and say, oh, let's just accept everything. Not at all. So now I come back and I say, okay, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the idea that we have got to look at each piece. So then I start breaking all the pieces down and saying, what is going to allow you to live an ideal life, and how can I prove it? So we proved it. Now, what is this protocol? How did it help people? First and foremost, on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being ideal health, 1 being terrible health. On a scale of disease, 1 being no disease, 100 being death. By the time you know you're sick, you're already over 50 points. Did Bill Clinton know that he was dying of heart blockage, of atherosclerosis, carotid artery? No, he didn't. So his doctors, remember this, think of this for a moment. Considered the best doctors in the world said that Bill Clinton was in outstanding health. And I'm saying on my radio show, not possible. The man smokes cigars, he drinks, he eats cheeseburgers, he doesn't exercise, he puts on the sweatsuit, looks kind of nice, and smiles, but he doesn't exercise, right? And he's under enormous stress. So to me, that means he's only producing disease. I don't see anything he was doing to promote wellness. So I said his doctors are wrong. And by the time they find he's sick, he's going to be real sick. Well, that's what happens. Right now, if your arteries are clogged, you can't feel it. Right now, if your brain is being attacked, you don't know it. There is a particular type of plaque that is laid down in the brain that causes loss of memory, dementia, Alzheimer's. And that kind of plaque you can't feel. And you won't know it for 20 or 40 years. If you have a breast tumor, you could have that breast tumor manifesting for 30 years before it actually is large enough to measure. So I'm saying that if you wait until you have a classically defined illness, you're waiting too long. Because Wellness is not the absence of disease. Wellness is a different manifestation. So I start with the idea, if we're well, how do we get well? Well, first and foremost, we understand that everything is a process. It is not a noun. Never think of cancer or diabetes as a noun. Think of it as a verb. I am cancering. I'm diabetesing. I'm acting. Because that is a process, and you can change processes. You can't change it now. Then you're just a victim. Put me on the medical treadmill and let me be treated. So I said, okay, vitamins, herbs, juices, living foods, chlorophyll. Those are phenomenally powerful. Why? Because they turn off inflammation. And what is the number one cause of disease at the cellular level? Inflammation. Cytokines, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Understand the biochemistry of the cell. You must have something that causes a prostaglandin E2 to manifest. And that's when you start eating French fries, hot doggers, hamburgers, pizzas, colas, caffeine. One of my doctoral dissertations, by the way, was on caffeineism. And don't be fooled, the caffeine is getting some good news now. There's nothing good about caffeine. All right? Nothing. Caffeine is vasoconstrictive. It interferes with nutrients getting in the brain and causes a substantial amount of gastric reflux. If you eliminate caffeine, you're going to eliminate most of gastric reflux and irritation to the intestines and the stomach. Also, it changes the pH of the body substantially. So when you get rid of, and by the way, one of the worst things you can possibly take into your system is artificial sweeteners. They are not good. Not good. The only people who should be consuming caffeine, artificial sweeteners, and electroconvulsive therapy are our politicians. Throw in a lobotomy. But don't give them to anyone else. Boy, they're strange people in Washington. I never trust anyone who wants power over me. All right? So I then say, all right, none of those. And when I say none, I mean none. In my world, I don't eat anything that's not good. I don't think things are not good. I don't do things that are not good. Everything I do honors me. So start with that concept. Never, never be your worst enemy. All right? Be your best friend. So everything that is inflammatory in nature is gone. Deep fried foods, gone. I've taken blood samples and shown what happens after a milkshake, what happens after French fries, what happens after a piece of meat. Your blood is just thick. And when it's thick like that, red blood cells can aggregate, and that can lead to a stroke. It also increases low-density lipoproteins, triglycerides, and if you're on a high-protein diet, and the Atkins diet, and look at Atkins. Not a good endorsement. Hey, Bob. Bob, if you're a vegetarian, you'd be sitting here today. You realize that, don't you? High meat is high methionine. High methionine is high homocysteine. Elevated homocysteine is a major inflammatory agent and a major factor in heart disease. So, here's the protocol I put these people on. No meat, no chicken, no refined foods, no processed sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no caffeine. So then some people say, well, there's nothing else to eat. But you know better. In point of fact, I put them, they could have unlimited amounts of salads. They had grains and beans, nuts and seeds and legumes. I made sure they had a handful of walnuts every day and pine nuts and almonds and great recipes that they can prepare these with. If they chose to have fish, they could, but it wasn't necessary because they could also get their omega-3 fatty acids from walnut and avocado and flaxseed. But if they chose fish, it's a good source of those. and lots of fresh juices, starting with 1 glass of juice per day, building up to 8 glasses. They made it on Sunday, and they could freeze it and put it in bags, so each night they put it in the refrigerator, and the next day they had their juice ready. I had showed people how to make their salads all in one day, put them in bags for the day, press the air out, zip it, put it in there, and they stay fresh. So it was convenient. They actually saved time. And then I got them exercising. So on a scale of 1 to 100, the perfect diet, which, and by the way, one of the guys, Fred Fisher, was given a very short time to live. He had congestive heart failure. He had gangrene in his right leg, and he was 717 pounds. The problem was his doctor said, if we operate, you will die. If we don't operate, you're going to die. They were in a dilemma. That's when he started following the protocol. He's overcome all diseases, including depression, arthritis, congestive heart failure, diabetes, elevated blood pressure, and he's lost 353 pounds. Fred Fisher. I had him in, I've done 15 specials for public television, PBS stations around the country. You might have seen some of these, right? Especially if you're in Detroit, Denver, Los Angeles, Florida. In any case, both the guy who overcame Parkinson's and Fred Fisher have been in these. So I'd like to bring these in as people showing what's really possible. So the diet, people lost weight without ever trying to lose weight. That is a normal way that the body reacts when you're giving it living nutrients instead of dead nutrients. And I never, ever restricted people's calories. Not needed when you're eating the right food. Then I got people exercising. The key was they had to exercise 45 minutes a day, 6 days a week, aerobically, and 1/2 hour a day with resistance exercises to hit all those muscle groups, burn up the inner fat. And also, we know that it strengthens the muscles. It also strengthens the bone, because when you're doing power walking, every time, if I'm power walking, and I'm power walking like this, every time my foot hits the ground, boom, like this, I'm forcing minerals into the long bones. So power walking, adding in calcium, magnesium, boron, manganese, and silica, enhances bone mineralization. And remember, a lot of your immune system also comes, the B cells, for example, come from the bone. So people's minerals started to thicken out, and their bones started to thicken out. As a result, osteoporosis in men and women reduced. Because we got rid of all the inflammatory agents and started taking in the juices, starting with 1 glass of juice a day and working up to 6. At the end of 6 months, they were taking 6 glasses a day, and different combinations. But a lot of cruciferous vegetables, always diluted with aloe vera, which has over 200 healing phytonutrients, great for viruses, bacteria, but also chlorophyll in an easy way to absorb it through celery and cucumber, also cabbage, which is great for healing intestinal problems, gastrointestinal problems. And suddenly, prostates began to shrink. All the arthritis joints began to move. The essential fatty acids, getting them to have coconut, raw organic coconut oil each morning, and flaxseed oil. I'd have them have everybody started their day with a berry juice. Blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, cherries, cranberries, boysenberries, blackcurrants. Fresh, frozen, or concentrate went in there. And then on top of that, teaspoon of raw coconut oil, then flaxseed oil, and then some kind of either rice milk, soy milk, apple juice. Well, that's how they got started, plus protein, anywhere from 20 to 30 grams protein, and they were good to go. They had fiber, they had healing phytonutrients, and we know that, for example, blueberries, which is one of the best 5 foods in the world, contains enough phytonutrients to help block some of the processes of cancer. It also helps enhance the nutrient bioavailability in the brain. Then I started giving them individual nutrients. They were all in the same protocol. I gave brain nutrients, I gave heart nutrients, and overall nutrients. And the 3 most important nutrients to help slow down the aging process were L-carnosine, acetyl L-carnitine, and glycerophosphorylcholine, and then beyond that was phosphatidylserine, and then ginkgo. And within 3 months, people were saying, my memory's back. Everybody had more energy. They were sleeping less, but being far more revitalized. Vision was improving. But I'm talking about across the spectrum. In fact, I then had subgroups. I had one whole group of women who were menopausal and postmenopausal. We managed to get women who were postmenopausal to become premenopausal. We turned off hot flashes in a matter of weeks. Now imagine someone, I just heard someone say, well, what's good about that? All right, fair enough. Good question. All right. A period. Okay? Historically revered by women, feared by men. Men couldn't understand how anyone could bleed for 5 days and not die. Some still have that attitude. Thank goodness we're beyond that. And someone, oh, it's the curse. Well, it's not a curse. It's balancing hormones. But let's say you don't want the period anymore. I don't want my period anymore. Fine. Here's what you get instead. Fatigue, weight gain, underactive thyroid, frequently an irregular heartbeat, sagging and bagging skin. Some of you will get skin that's so loose, turkey skin under the neck, that if you stuck your head out the window when you were driving, you'd flap yourself to death. Now that's an ugly sight. How'd she die? Beat herself to death. Your mucous membrane is going to be awful thin. You're going to start seeing veins all over your face and your hands. You're going to be fatigued because your body's not going to be able to produce enough ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which creates the energy within the mitochondria of the cell. You're going to start losing much of your memory. You're going to have a lot of night sweats. And so I have to ask, your nails are going to turn fungus and ridged, toenails and then fingernails. Your lips are going to thin. You're going to get hair. You're going to look in the mirror one day and say, my God, I got a mustache. So all that is possible, all right? We reverse that. Women got their bodies back. One of those women this year joined me. I said, you want to see how much your bodies can do? She said, yeah. She won the silver medal in the World Games. 1 year ago this week, I won the gold in the 20K. And by the way, just to show you that I live what I do and talk about, I'm 190 pounds, 28-inch waist, 1.3% body fat, and I've won 463 straight race championships, including haven't lost a race in 32 years. I don't say that to brag. Last week, I got outstanding track and field master athlete in the racewalking division in Florida. I run and I racewalk both. I do this in the people I've worked with, like Sid Howard, the greatest master miler in America. He's been on this protocol for over 30 years. Is to show you that until you do something, people don't believe it's possible. Until Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, we didn't believe it was possible. Within 2 weeks after him breaking it, other people were breaking it. What were they waiting for? We wait to see that something can be done. Then once someone does it, then we say, ah, and we go through that door. As long as I keep believing I can do things and experiment with myself and do them, and then if it works for me, then it means it works for you if you choose it. So if I choose not to get old and gray, this is my natural hair, and every man in my family is bald. Every man in my family is bald except my brother, Howard, who has 3 hairs, which he refuses to cut. And when the wind blows, it looks like he's got a little aerial standing up. And I've tried twice to cut those off when he was asleep, but he'd wake up and say, don't you dare. So why am I not bald? I was going bald. If you look at a picture of my book in 1968, it looked like I was going bald. Because I have rejuvenated the cells, changed the DNA sequence. Now, I didn't hear everything, but I heard someone mentioning about genes. Yes. Are you familiar with the term epigeneticism? No? All right, let me explain what this is. Dr. Bruce Lipton, molecular biologist, Stanford University, took the DNA, the genes out of cells, and the cell continued to do what it was supposed to do. That's like you taking the engine out of a car and yet it rides. Take the brain out of your skull and you can think. It went against every single rule of reason and logic and science, especially mechanistic science. And he couldn't find in 4 years the answer. As one of the founders of molecular biology, no one could explain this phenomena. How can you take the gene out of a cell and the cell continue? It was not in molecular biology he found the answer. He had to go into quantum physics and spirituality. Why? A big piece of the puzzle. The biggest piece of the puzzle. We are a direct output of the environment that we're in. It is called in physics entanglement theory. We are connected. We're all connected. It's just that we interfere in that connection. When you cease interfering in the connection, then you can connect. And you've all had experiences where you think about someone and the phone rings and they're there. Do any of you listen to my radio show over the internet? Very sick man there. Jesus, heal that man! For those of you who don't, every day I'm on at noon Eastern Time over the internet. If you go to GaryNull.com or VoiceAmerica.com, you can hear it. And you can listen to any of the other shows. Well, 2 weeks ago I was doing a show and I mentioned a buddy back from the 1960s. And I hadn't seen him since, and I'm talking about him. I get off the air, the phone rings, it's my buddy. 40 years. What's the likelihood of... And he didn't have a radio. He's in Hawaii. He's saying, I was just thinking about you. What's the likelihood someone's thinking about you after 40 years and you just mention their name and they call you? That is synchronicity. Now, I'll show you how this all ties together. So now I'm trying to help people and I'm seeing there's limitation. I take the rats and I take them out of their little cages. And I make my entire room their home. They can live anywhere. Freaked out my staff when rats start crawling all over your head, but they're cute little things. They don't bite. All right? But try to tell someone that, I don't want a rat on me, she says. Well, those rats that were no longer in a cage lived 28% longer. Not only that, I stopped feeding them regular meals. I would hide their food. And they had to go and find their food. It challenged them. They live longer. A challenging environment is what you need. But what does the average American do? They sit in front of a television. They go to a movie. They go to a ball game. They read a book. None of this is challenging. It is passive. We have become a nation that is passive. What did they do in Italy? They were active, never passive. They did everything themselves. Everyone had hobbies. I had hobbies growing up. Where do our kids today have hobbies? Hobby is seeing how much they can spend. Right? They're on the internet. The internet is passive. Computers are passive. Cell phones are passive. iPods are passive. Not that they're bad, they're good, they're tools, but my goodness, you have to have some balance in your life. The average American only reads one nonfiction book per year after high school. Think of that. If we're not active, we are passive. There's no neutral. So I created a challenging environment, live longer, gave them living foods, live longer, got rid of inflammatory agents, live longer. And so the pieces began to come together. But there was something missing because some of the sickest people I've ever met are in the health movement. Well, they are. Some of the most demented people I've ever met are in the spiritual movement. Well, it's true. Go to some of these yoga retreats. I had a spiritual retreat once. I invited Deepak Chopra and a lot of people up to it, Dr. Moss, Larry Dawsey. The people were so angry trying to get the right seat, they were fighting with each other. I want this, I want this. And I said, hold on, this is a spiritual retreat. I know, but I got to get the seat. I said, there's something disconnecting here. Remember, we think at a higher level and act at a lower one. Why? Why do smart people do stupid things? Huh? Because we are not living a fully integrated existence. There are things missing. We're not getting it all together. We're taking bits and pieces and saying this is it. The macrobiotics, everything is macrobiotics. The raw foodists, everything's raw foodists. The juices, everything's juicing. The vitamin, everything's vitamin. The Scientologists, everything's Scientology. Everything is an ism. It doesn't work that way. That is taking the whole, fracturing it, taking a piece and saying, this is my total reality. And only through these years of seeing other people, what they had and then what we had. So then I just put it together, and that's what I gave these people. So here's the percentages. Perfect diet, including supplements and juices, approximately 20%. Now think of that. 20%. That's why people who are eating healthy and taking vitamins frequently are also suffering from illnesses. If they stop there, they don't have the answer. Exercise, 15%. Stress management, learning how to stop personalizing everything that happens. I've been an activist my whole career. Do you think that I would have done anything had I stopped the first time when I was trying to ban DDT, and it took 17 years, and get MSG out of baby food? Remember, before I got on that case, you go into the store and every baby food had MSG in it, monosodium glutamate, modified food starch, salt and sugar. You go in now, it says sugar-free. Yeah, that's because I fought for 11 years. The GIs who were in Vietnam, 22 years I fought to get you recognized that Agent Orange was causing your illnesses. Right now, my newest film, my newest documentary, Friendly Fire, shows what has happened to the GIs who've been in Gulf War I and Gulf War II, suffering from depleted uranium and anthrax and botulism injections, and how those are real illnesses, and we deny that so we don't have to be responsible for covering their insurance and payments. I'm fighting for them. So needless to say, with all the things I've done to go up against the medical community, go up against corruption, and to promote healthy living, I get a lot of flack. What don't I ever do? I don't take it personally. Because I know when you're talking negative about me, you're not talking about me. I'm a spiritual person. All right? I'm the guy who has seen 55,000 persons counseling them one-on-one. I've never charged a penny to a human being. Not a penny. That goes against the American way. If you're famous and you're the most famous health person in the world, charge the most, right? No, because what makes good economic sense may not make good spiritual sense. And my spiritual values always come first. And because I do not personalize, I can then help people even if people don't want help. A lot of people don't want to hear the message of help. You go to give them advice, they don't want to hear it, they're angry with you. You have to just be an example yourself, and when they're ready for that message, they'll ask you. So now we have stress, and we're stressed to the max. And think of all the people in this country, and I came to New York on a Greyhound bus with $12. All right? And so I came from poor. So I know poor. I worked my way through college, going to night school to get my doctorate, postdoctorate, and those other things that come along with it. And never once did I work because I wanted a standard of living. I worked for a quality of life. So when I didn't have things, I didn't feel bad. I remember my second day in New York City having no money, so I was just sleeping in Center Park, looking up the Plaza Hotel and listening to Tom Jones's What's New Pussycat on the radio. And I'm hearing this music, I'm looking and saying, this is a great city. It's the middle of summertime. It was warm. And I got a job as a cook in a restaurant, and so I got food to eat. And then I got a place for $2 a night in the Sloan House where people could go. They gave $2 rooms. And because I was poor, I chose not to feel poor, think poor, or act poor. And when everyone else says, gee, you don't have anything, Gary, I says, what am I lacking? Well, you don't have a television, more time to see reality. All right? Yeah, but you don't have, all those clothes. If I had all the clothes in the world and you didn't like me, would it make a difference? So what I did is I started to look at all the ways that people were feeling that because they were deprived of something, they had to feel bad. So within a year, I had the best wardrobe in New York you could imagine. I went to the Salvation Army. I saw the boxes, Fifth Avenue, Madison Avenue, and Park Avenue. I didn't like Fifth Avenue. It was kind of bankish, but I liked Madison Avenue. $5. I learned how to sew. I learned how to cut fabric. And so I fitted all my friends were dressed to the nines, right? I would go across once a month and get old furniture that someone had soiled or they threw out on Park Avenue. The rich people throw their furniture away once a month on a Wednesday night. We'd lug it back across the park. Police stopped asking us, were we stealing, because they see it's all the same people. I'd strip it all down. I did woodworking, and we get new fabric. And suddenly all my friends and us have beautiful furniture. I went to every Broadway play. I go 3 times a week to Broadway plays. We'd stand outside in our nice suits, and when people come out at first act, we say, what did you think of that first act? They tell us all about the first act, and we go in and sit down and find an empty seat for the second and third act. Same way with concerts. So I missed a little bit. No big deal. So I wrote a book, Surviving and Settling in New York on a Shoestring. And it was rejected 132 times. And then one day, and I was so poor, I would actually walk it to the publisher and leave it on their desk. And one day I'm in Central Park, I'm thinking, wow, I learned a new lesson. I shouldn't have my book published. Because if I got it published, I'd stop growing. Because all the people I know who are authors stop growing. They're living off their ego and wanting bigger apartments. And that's not why I want to write. I want to write to share information with people. I don't care about being an author. Wow, I'd have become an author. I'd have gotten the jacket with, the pat on the, elbow, and I'd have made those poses. Yes. I think authors, intellects. I must be smarter. I'm published. So I went home that night, and I felt really good because I understood that the universe helps us if we're ready for it. And I wasn't ready for it. And the next morning, 2 publishers who rejected called and said they want to publish it. And one was offering me $500, the other $50. I selected the $50 one. That book was widely read, and Sylvia Porter and Kepler's Changing Time gave it good reviews. I was on Mike Douglas' show, who just passed away. And suddenly, an older woman looked and said, there's no one young in the health movement. Gary, you're young. Write a book for my publishing company. That became the biggest selling book in the history of nutrition, the Complete Handbook of Nutrition. It was published in 1972. I didn't have a background, but I had common sense. I went back to school, got my education, became a scientist, nutritionist, board certified, and all the other stuff. Along the way, I found that being a documentary maker or broadcast journalist, these were not careers for me. Those are merely different venues to share insights. That's all it is. This is a venue for an insight. And then I started to realize that if I fit in, I would cease being authentic. And I realized, and I'm honest about it, I don't fit in anywhere. I don't. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat because they both make stupid choices. All right? And well, it's true. The trouble is they never have to be held accountable for their choice. They never pay for it. We pay for their mistakes. And I realized that why don't I just enjoy being alive as a human being? And if I can associate with people without any consideration, whether you're rich or poor, young or old, whether you're male or female, whether you're Mexican or German, at the end of the day, there's only one race, the human race. And we're all connected. Now, we now know that when you think a thought and you think it with intent and you focus on that intent and you put that intent out in the universe, there are waves of energy that goes out. And then that energy comes back. If you're prepared for what the universe gives you when it comes back, you have synergy, and with that, you have transition, transformation, you grow. If you don't do that, then you'll start going through life like it's a New Age spiritual supermarket. I'll take a little Deepak, and I'll put it into my bag, and I'll take a little Wayne Dyer. He's good. I'll put him in there. And Tony Robbins, his big smile. From here to, I'll put Tony in there with a smile and clapping hands, making him money. And he's the only one who makes money. I can promise you all that. But, that's all right. And I'll put some wheatgrass in there, even suppositories, sneak those in. I was heard, didn't I hear? And everybody hears something. a little pyramid. And now I got all this, 3,000 things. Check me out. I should be healthy. Why am I not healthy? Because I'm not happy. Oh, you mean happy is a part of it? Yeah, let's go back to Italy. Let's go back to those people sitting at the table. Let's go down to Jamaica. Let's go to where people are poor but happy. Why are poor, happy people living longer lives than rich, unhappy people in America? And yet we're told that to be educated is to live a long life. To be rich is to live a long life. It's not true. To be happy gives you 40% of the equation. 40%. So when we look at what constitutes a long life, it is the belief that you have in yourself and sharing that with other people who share common values and a common energy. Epigeneticism. If I'm around positive people, I'm supported by their energy and it enhances mine as I do them. If I, with intent, want something and I know that I am prepared to do something positive with it in sharing with the world instead of taking what I have and rushing off to make my little mansion that I alone guard and protect, you stay out. You're not. And think of the exclusion. In my world, there's inclusion, no exclusion. So that's a part of it. I want to tell you something. If you think the rich are better or happier, I've counseled them. They're not. All right? And I once said when someone was very caught on themselves, they came in with a whole posse, a whole group, and I said, what are these people here for? Well, they're here, with me. I said, well, you're the one getting counseled. They got to go. Well, they can't go. Why? There's your security blanket. Well, do you know who I am? I said, I know who you are. But what relevance is that? I said, think of that for a moment. Let's take the 100 most beautiful women in Hollywood. Let's take the 100 handsomest men on the planet. The 100 greatest scientists. The 100 top chairmen of departments of all major universities. The top richest men on the planet. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And let's put them all together on a giant platform. If this room were an entire platform and they were all sitting on a toilet and you were below, you tell me which is which. So let's get over ourselves. All right? A whole lot is made about power and fame and all that. Trust me, that is not what's important, because at the end of the day, you're going to like your friend, not Donald Trump. Because your friend and you exude a human quality. You're not afraid of maximizing your own spiritual potential by allowing that to connect with other people. And that's what we embrace. We embrace the humility within a person, not their arrogance. We may be morbidly fascinated by arrogance, but it's what makes a person care about us that allows us to feel that love and warmth in return. And we heal when we're filled with love. Love expands. Fear constricts. Honesty expands. Deceit constrict. So when you're trying to help yourself overcome an illness, but you're doing so by thinking negative thoughts, fatalistic thoughts, you become what you think. There was a really interesting scientist in Japan recently who got a group of Buddhist monks to meditate on a single drop of water. And the water was in 20 cubes and frozen. And one thought was to be love, and another thought was to be peace, another thought, and then they froze it something like 30 degrees below zero, and then they brought it up after that to 5 degrees below and put it under a microscope. And where you have a normal drop of water, you have kind of a chaos of expressing the atoms. There was perfect beauty and symmetry when they focused on love. Their thoughts created the reality. There was also, I'll leave you with two other things. There was a group at Jesuit University in Wheeling, West Virginia, who gave a group of students some alcohol to see what effects it would have on them, the drunken state, and they all got drunk. And then they unblinded the study and found that they had given them water. They thought they were getting alcohol. They manifested drunk. Another group got burned at a different place and then got a miracle cream. Well, the miracle cream turned out to be a placebo. But then so did the burn. They were touched with an ice cube. They thought they were getting a soldering iron. They manifested a burn. That's how powerful your mind is. So imagine the power of a positive thought. Imagine the power of an intentional thought. How is it that I'm able to have the things in my life work? And this was just asked yesterday on my radio show. You want to hear an interesting show? Download yesterday's show. There was a psychologist who called in, and one of her graduate students was doing a thesis on me. And she wrote a 5-page email saying, "You don't fit the model. You shouldn't be successful." All right. Well, thanks. You know, you don't fit a psychological model. Well, of course I don't. But why have you achieved international or national acclaim and success in 11 different fields? 80 books published, New York Times best-selling books, and all this other stuff. Because I didn't need to. I didn't try to. It's never my intent. My intent was to help people and never once think about the person's capacity to pay. Just help people. The results are the universe brings it back to you. When you help human beings from the heart, that is your reward. What better payback could you get when someone says, "I would be dead and I'm alive. My mother had cancer and stage 4 and now she doesn't." Now, it's not important that the scientific community doesn't care about this or is too afraid to understand this, because I understand that they're a paradigm. And paradigms don't like to change. They feel threatened by change. The average person is in a comfort zone. The number one addiction in America is comfort addiction. People are afraid to change. They're going to hold on to things and make piecemeal, tiny, itty-bitty little changes. That doesn't change the dynamic of the whole. You've got to change the whole in order to see major progress. That's why those people in those health support groups had major changes in their lives. And the scientific community can't wrap its mind around how in the world could you reverse diseases, improve on those diseases if you didn't treat them? Because I wasn't treating a disease. I was merely helping a person rebalance their choices. Everything in life is a choice. Everything is an exchange. If I choose to be nice to you, I've exchanged being not nice. If I choose to drink a juice, I've exchanged that for maybe drinking alcohol. If I choose to be open and vulnerable, I've exchanged being closed and recessive. At the end of the day, you are a mirror manifestation of the choices you've made and the energy that comes with that. So if positive energy opens, expands, and heals and connects us with universal energy in each other, why would I want anything other than that? So my intent is to send the message out. So those people are living longer lives because they have the intent each day to honor their life. They don't need anything but the dynamic of self. They understand who they are, the life they're living. They appreciate the people around them. The family is important to them. Now, you compare that to someone in Los Angeles who goes to see Al Gore's new movie, which is a good movie, An Undeniable Truth, and they're very concerned about global warming as they go out and get in their SUV to go back and stop off at Starbucks to get something and then stop off at McDonald's to get something to go back to a gated community that once was an orchard or a forest so they can talk about global warming. We've got to stop being politically correct. We have to start being honest and universally honest. There is only one truth. It is universal truth. Everything else is how manifestations of that truth are diminished down to where we have pragmatism and we adapt. At the end of this day, you will either transform your life or you'll adapt your life. If you adapt, you're accepting that you can't change circumstances beyond you, in which case the circumstance and the energy of the circumstance control how you're going to feel, what you're going to eat, what you're going to think, what you're going to wear, where you're going to live, what you're going to do. You're going to feel disempowered because you've adapted to disempowerment, or you surrender that energy, manifest only one energy, not dualism, and you go towards transformation. You can transform your life by believing in your life completely. When you do that, then you have unlimited potential to be the ideal that we were all meant to be when we were born. Thank you very much. Thank you.